Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Keeping an Eye on the Geopolitical Ball with me, Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at Friends of Europe. My topic this week is the recently agreed deal between the UK, the US, and Australia to give Australia nuclear submarines. This is known as AUKUS, and it's certainly been dominating the headlines. Most of the news has concerned a spat between France and the United States because France was not warned in advance that this deal was coming and was hoping that it would be supplying the submarines to Australia, albeit conventional ones, rather than the United States and the UK. But I'm not going to talk about that spat this week because it's largely calmed down. President Macron has spoken to President Biden, and Biden has apologized for not having consulted the French more fulsomely. So now the attention is turning quite rightly to the real implications of this AUKUS deal, which of course concern the future security arrangements in the Indo-Pacific. The Australians have changed partners precisely because they believe that the security situation in the Indo-Pacific has worsened. China has become more assertive, risking to dominate the entire region, not just the East China and South China Seas or the Taiwan Straits. And Australia clearly now needs nuclear submarines with their greater depth, their greater range, their missile firing capabilities, their intelligence gathering abilities, and their abilities to deploy special forces rather than conventional submarines, which would have been more useful only if Australia was worried about its immediate shores and the defence of its immediate homeland. Now, these submarines won't be given to the Australians for some time yet, but already the consequences of this new partnership, AUKUS, are fairly clear to see. And I would like to mention four today. Number one is the threat to nuclear proliferation. This transfer of technology isn't going to give Australia nuclear weapons. The UK, the US have been pretty clear on that. And indeed, the Virginia-class submarines that Australia is likely to get are not able to fire US nuclear warheads. But of course, there will be a great deal of transfer of intellectual property, of reactor design, of technology, of fuel rods, of fuel rod reprocessing, of know-how, as well as training and expertise. And Australia could potentially use this later on to build nuclear weapons. Certainly the highly enriched uranium, which fuels the reactors, is the same fuel that you need to make a nuclear weapon. And therefore, it's going to be very important in coming months that the International Atomic Energy Agency demonstrate that it is imposing sufficient controls and safeguards on Australia to make sure that the nuclear proliferation treaty is not being violated. Because if it is, then the door will be open to South Korea, many other countries in the region to argue that it too should have nuclear-powered submarine technology. A second consequence concerns security in the region. Australia, in going for this deal, has made it clear that it now sees its China policy as being based more on containment than on the kind of cooperation and trade that used to characterize the Beijing-Canberra relationship, but which has been somewhat ruined in recent months by all of the trade embargoes that Beijing has imposed on Australia. Now, this then begs the question of what is going to be the relationship between AUKUS, this new tripart defence agreement, and the Quad, the four-power arrangement where the United States is now meeting more frequently with India and Japan, as well as Australia, and which is dealing with the soft power aspects of security, exercises, environmental standards, cooperation on technology standards, cooperation on illegal or abusive fishing in the region, the distribution of vaccines and the like. How does the hard security military pact of Australia, the UK, and the US fit into this larger framework of the Quad when it comes to projecting stability across the region? It's not likely that many additional countries will join AUKUS because it's based on a very tight-knit English language speaking cultural tradition of cooperation among these three Anglo-Saxon powers. But it is possible that countries like France and the UK or others could be pulled into greater cooperation with the Quad in the future. The third consequence concerns the EU, because ironically, on the very day that the AUKUS pact was announced, the EU in Brussels was also announcing its new strategy for the region. The EU approach typically is based on a broad approach. It's about cooperation, it's about trade, it's about standards, it's about dealing with climate change and so on in the region. It's inclusive rather than exclusive of China. It tries to balance cooperation together with competition and inevitably constrainment and deterrence in the military side. The EU wants to have its cake and eat it too. But can it now that Washington and Beijing are both calling on the EU to take sides? So you are either with me or you are against me. And the fact that China this week banned a German frigate, the Bavaria, from visiting a Chinese port because it felt that even one German warship in the region was unhelpful, shows that Beijing is now saying to the Europeans too that we prefer your trade delegations to your warships. So how does the EU maintain this balanced policy in a less friendly environment? The final issue concerns trade. The United States is now pushing hard on military ties with the region, while still not making clear if it's interested in signing up to any future trade pacts. It was, after all, President Trump that cancelled the transatlantic partnership at the beginning of his administration. The 12 countries involved decided to go ahead anyway and form their own comprehensive and progressive trade agreement. China has now asked to sign up to that, whereas in Congress there is still a great deal of hostility to any new trade pacts. So does it make sense for the Americans to build military ties if China is increasingly going to dominate the future trade relationships? This is not going to be a comprehensive security architecture, and it's not going to induce the Chinese in the long run to follow Western technology standards or Western standards on transparency of investments or Western standards on labor rights. As a Singapore diplomat pointed out last week, the lack of a trade policy for the US is a gaping hole in its strategy for the region. So the AUKUS Pact, to paraphrase the General de Gaulle speaking in the 1960s, is a kick in the apple cart, which is meant to upset things in the hope that it poses a problem which needs to be solved. This is all very well, but we have to hope that when the pieces of the apple cart fall back down to earth, they all fall in a good and safe place. Thank you for watching and listening today. Look forward, as always, to engaging with you this time next week. Bye for now.